At 6:30 in the morning, I stood on the edge of Willow Creek and watched an HOA-approved cement truck crawl onto my grandfather's stone bridge. I warned them it would collapse. The woman in charge just laughed. What she didn't know was that every crack, every truck, every lie had already been logged. This wasn't an accident. It was the final move in a trap that would cost them millions. The sound is what I remember first. Not the engine, not the driver yelling, but the stones. Old stone has a sound when it's pushed too far. A low groan, almost like it's breathing through clenched teeth. I'd heard it before, years ago, when a heavy tractor crossed too fast. This was worse. Much worse. The mixer's drum was spinning slow and heavy, full load. You could smell the wet concrete before you could see the truck. Sharp, metallic, mixed with diesel exhaust. I was standing there in my work apron, coffee mug still warm in my hand, watching a machine that weighed more than 35 tons roll onto a bridge designed in 1923 for less than half of that. And right behind the truck stood Marjorie Whitman. Spotless white blazer. Not a speck of dust. Sunglasses big enough to hide whatever passed for a conscience. She had that smile people get when they think they've finally won. "Relax, Roman," she called out. "Those old rocks weren't built for real trucks, honey." Then she laughed. That laugh did something to me. Not anger. Not panic. Something colder. Because in that moment, I understood this wasn't about a shortcut or construction convenience. This was deliberate. She wanted the bridge gone. And she wanted me gone with it. Let me rewind. My name is Roman Kellerman. I'm 52 years old, retired civil engineer. For most of my life, I designed infrastructure other people never thought about: load ratings, stress tolerances, failure points. When I retired, I came back to the 12 acres my grandfather left me in rural Pennsylvania. Quiet land. Creek running through it. An old barn I turned into a workshop. And the bridge. My grandfather built that bridge by hand. 7 years of his life, stone by stone. He didn't rush it. He measured everything twice, sometimes 3 times. Back then, heavy equipment meant a tractor or a hay wagon. The bridge was rated for 15 tons, clearly marked, posted on steel signs I maintained myself. Every morning, I walked out there with my coffee. Ran my hand over the stones, still cool from the night. Listened to blackbirds arguing in the cattails. That bridge wasn't just a structure. It was history you could touch. And it was the only way in or out of my land. Everywhere else was swamp or protected wetlands. If you wanted to reach my property, you crossed that bridge. That mattered more than I realized at the time. 3 years ago, Millbrook Heights wrapped itself around my land like ivy. A gated HOA community. Mostly retirees. Decent people, for the most part. They bought my custom furniture. They asked about the bridge. They respected history. Then Marjorie Whitman took over the HOA board. Her first interaction with me wasn't a hello. It was a violation notice taped to my barn door. Said the building was an aesthetic concern and needed to be painted beige to match community standards. I tried to explain it was a historic structure. She smiled like I'd just told her a cute joke. "Roman," she said, standing on my porch in a blazer sharp enough to cut glass, "maybe you'd be happier somewhere more rustic." She said rustic the way people say problem. After that, the violations kept coming. Grass too long. Mailbox too short. Fence too withered. Meanwhile, other neighbors told me, quietly, that she was pressuring them too. Daily notices. Threats. Legal language meant to scare, not solve. Then I noticed something else. She started bringing people onto my land. Investors. Developers. Standing near my barn, gesturing, talking about Phase 2. Condos where my workshop stood. Access roads through my orchard. She wasn't hiding it. She just assumed I'd fold. That's when Pinnacle Construction entered the picture. Derek was the owner. Built like a linebacker. Loud laugh. Louder truck engines. The HOA hired his company to build a new clubhouse, and suddenly, my bridge became very popular. One Monday morning, I heard the roar before I saw it. A cement mixer rolling straight toward the bridge. I stepped out, apron on, mug in hand. "Excuse me," I said. "This is private property. Weight limit is 15 tons. Derek didn't even slow down. "HOA cleared it," he shouted. "Take it up with them." Marjorie was standing right there, arms crossed, watching the stones flex under a load they were never meant to carry. That was the first crack. Literally. After that, the trucks came daily. Same time. Same route. 35, sometimes 40 tons. Every pass shook my workshop. Mortar started falling into the creek. Hairline fractures spread like veins. I measured them. Engineers measure things. It's what we do when everyone else is shouting. I installed cameras. Motion sensors. Log times, weights, license plates. I borrowed portable scales and weighed the trucks myself. The numbers weren't even close. I sent cease and desist letters. Polite. Legal. Clear. Derek tossed his in the cab of his truck without reading it. Marjorie went straight to the neighborhood Facebook group and posted about a selfish landowner blocking community progress. That's when people started showing up at my door at night. Agnes, the retired librarian. Tyler and Beth, the young couple with twins. Apologizing. Whispering. Too scared to speak publicly. They'd seen what happened to people who crossed her. The trucks didn't stop. They got worse. Night runs. Fence damage. A mailbox knocked clean off its post. One morning, a bookcase I'd spent 3 months building shook itself apart when a mixer crossed too fast. I hired Dr. Elaine Wong, a structural engineer I trusted. She took one look at the data and shook her head. "Roman," she said, "this bridge is fine for what it was designed for. But these loads? 6 weeks. Maybe 8 before catastrophic failure." I doubled down. More cameras. Better sensors. Night vision. Every vibration logged. Every crack mapped. I went to the county records office and dug through dusty files until my eyes burned. And I found it. The bridge wasn't shared access. It never was. No easement. No right-of-way. Every truck crossing it was trespassing. That's when Marjorie escalated. Code enforcement showed up. Inspectors. Complaints about damage that didn't exist until her trucks caused it. She stood behind them, smiling. I paid out of pocket for a full structural report. Dr. Wong's findings were airtight. Damage matched overload stress, not age. Marjorie responded with legal threats. Eminent domain talk. HOA meetings filled with PowerPoint slides about traffic flow and economic growth. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. People were watching. And I was still calculating. Because when bullies think they're winning, they get careless. And engineers don't panic. We prepare. And the bridge? It was already telling me exactly how this would end. By the time Marjorie Whitman decided to really turn up the pressure, the bridge was already dying. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean mathematically. Every structure has a failure curve. Load, fatigue, repetition. When you push past design limits over and over, collapse isn't a possibility, it's a schedule. And thanks to months of sensors, logs, and data, I knew exactly where my grandfather's bridge was on that curve. What surprised me wasn't how reckless they became. It was how confident. The harassment shifted from passive to personal. Code violations started arriving weekly. Anonymous complaints about my workshop. Trucks idling at midnight, diesel generators humming loud enough to shake my walls. One morning I found my driveway blocked by cones and equipment with a handwritten sign that said temporary access, HOA approved. Temporary, my ass. My furniture orders slowed. Then stopped. Clients told me, quietly, that someone had called warning them about safety issues on my property. Fake pizza deliveries showed up at 2 in the morning. My phone rang and went dead when I answered. And every time I drove past the clubhouse construction site, there was Marjorie, clipboard in hand, smiling, watching me like a cat watching a mouse get tired. She thought I was breaking. What I was actually doing was digging. County basements are quiet at night. Dusty. Smell like old paper and mildew. I started going there after dinner when sleep wasn't happening anyway. Property records. Utility permits. Old infrastructure maps rolled so tight they fought you when you tried to open them. And then I found it. My grandfather's original permit. Buried under amendments and revisions was a note that made my pulse spike. The bridge wasn't just a crossing. It was the primary utility corridor. Water. Power. Data. Everything feeding Millbrook Heights ran under those stones. Over decades, the HOA had piggybacked line after line onto infrastructure they didn't own. Without that bridge, 47 homes would lose water, internet, emergency services routing. And Marjorie? She'd promised her investors guaranteed access and utilities for Phase 2. In writing. On projections she'd presented as facts. Infrastructure she was actively destroying. I called my attorney that night. Then I called Dr. Wong. We installed high-resolution strain gauges and acoustic sensors under the bridge. Real-time monitoring. Every microshift recorded. The data gave us a window. A narrow one. One more overloaded truck would do it. We didn't stop them. That's important. I didn't block the bridge. Didn't chain it off. Didn't touch a thing. Everything was documented. Legal. Clean. Because when you stop someone, you share the blame. When you let them continue after warning them, responsibility stays exactly where it belongs. Marjorie filed her lawsuit 2 weeks later. Interference with business. Claimed that repeated access meant implied rights. My attorney laughed, then got serious. Even a bad lawsuit costs money to fight. And Marjorie knew that. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Talked about eminent domain. Talked about community necessity. I watched the recording later. She spoke with absolute confidence. That was her last mistake. The morning it happened, I woke up before the alarm. 6 a.m. cold air. Fog hugging the creek. Sensors pinging softly on my phone. Then the alert tone changed. I stepped outside just as the cement truck rolled in. Full load. Derek driving. Marjorie right behind him in her BMW, white blazer already on. The bridge groaned. A deep, terrible sound. Like stone exhaling its last breath. The center span dropped first. Then the east abutment sheared. 15 tons of wet concrete slid sideways as the entire structure collapsed into Willow Creek. Water exploded upward. Alarm screamed. The truck lurched and buried itself axle-deep in slurry and stone. Silence followed. Then panic. Utilities cut instantly. Cell service dropped. Someone screamed from the road. Marjorie's face went blank, then flushed, then twisted into something I'd never seen before. Reality. County vehicles arrived within minutes. Inspectors. Emergency crews. News vans. I handed over 3 months of documentation, sensor data, weight logs, expert reports. Inspector Bradley's hands shook as he flipped through it. "Mr. Kellerman," he said, "this is the most thorough property damage case I've ever seen." Then the county commissioner arrived. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just laid out numbers. Emergency utility rerouting, $400,000. Permanent infrastructure replacement, 18 months. Construction permits, suspended. Insurance claims denied due to negligence. Marjorie tried to speak. No one listened. Derek was arrested 2 weeks later. Federal charges: load misreporting, fraud. Pinnacle Construction folded within a month. The HOA board dissolved. Marjorie filed for bankruptcy. Her BMW was towed during a court-ordered asset review. And the bridge? Insurance paid for a rebuild. I worked with the Historical Society. Modern reinforcements hidden inside my grandfather's original stone design. Stronger. Safer. Legal. Agnes was elected HOA president. First rule passed banned harassment and misuse of HOA power. My furniture orders came back, doubled. Then tripled. Turns out people like buying from someone who stood their ground. Now, every morning, I walk out with my coffee. I touch the stone. Hear the creak. Watch kids play in the water where concrete once spilled. The bridge stands. And so does the lesson. Progress doesn't mean erasing the past. Community doesn't mean theft by paperwork. And standing your ground doesn't make you the bad guy, not when you're defending something built with care. So where's the line? When does development become destruction? If you've ever fought a neighbor, an HOA, or anyone who thought they could take what wasn't theirs, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one.